Was Tsutomu Yamaguchi the luckiest man in history, or the unluckiest? He was in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, when the world's first atomic bomb fell. Burned, deafened, but alive, he dragged himself onto a train headed for home. 3 days later, as he was describing the apocalyptic blast to his boss in Nagasaki, the sky once again erupted in a blinding flash. This is the unbelievable, yet true, story of the man who survived 2 atomic bombs. The engineer on a business trip. In the summer of 1945, World War II was grinding into its final brutal phase. For most people, life had become a tense routine of work, rationing, and air raid drills. For 29-year-old Tsutomu Yamaguchi, it was just business as usual. He was a gifted marine engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, designing the oil tankers that were so crucial to Japan's war effort. He was also a family man with a wife, Hisako, and an infant son, Katsutoshi, back in his hometown of Nagasaki. Yamaguchi wasn't a soldier, but his work was vital. That spring, his company had sent him on a 3-month business trip to Hiroshima, a bustling port city that housed a major military headquarters. He and 2 colleagues, Akira Iwanaga and Kuniyoshi Sato, were there to work on a new oil tanker design. As summer wore on, Yamaguchi grew anxious to get home. The project was finally done, and by early August, he was packed and ready to go. August 6, 1945, was supposed to be his very last day in Hiroshima. That morning, Yamaguchi and his colleagues headed to the train station, ready for the journey back to Nagasaki. But in a twist of fate that would both curse and save him, Yamaguchi realized he'd forgotten his hanko, a personal stamp used for official documents in Japan. Annoyed, he turned back toward the Mitsubishi shipyard to grab it, separating from his colleagues. He was walking through a potato patch, about 3 kilometers, or just under 2 miles from the city center, when he heard the drone of a single plane in the clear blue sky. He looked up and saw an American B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay. Then, he saw a small object attached to 2 parachutes drop from the plane. He watched it fall for a few moments, and then the world was torn apart by light. The first sun. At 8:15 in the morning, the atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, detonated. Yamaguchi would later describe it as looking like the lightning of a huge magnesium flare. In that instant, there was no sound, just an all-consuming, silent, white light that bleached the world of all color. He had just enough time to do what his air raid training taught him. He dove into a nearby ditch, covered his eyes, and jammed his thumbs into his ears. A split second later, the shockwave hit. It was a physical, hammering force that lifted him from the ground and hurled him through the air, slamming him down in the soft earth of the potato field. When he opened his eyes, everything was dark. Not the dark of night, but an unnatural, thick blackness filled with swirling dust and ash. He had survived the initial blast, but he was badly hurt. The left side of his body was scorched with burns. A sound had ruptured his eardrums, and he was temporarily blinded. As his vision slowly came back, he saw a living nightmare. The city he'd been in just moments before was gone. In its place were the skeletons of buildings, raging fires, and a horrifying silence that was soon broken by the cries of the injured. And then he saw it, the terrifying, iconic mushroom cloud churning and boiling over the ruins of Hiroshima. Dazed and in agony, Yamaguchi stumbled through the devastation. He was surrounded by unimaginable horror, melted corpses in the streets, and the ghostly figures of survivors with their skin hanging off in sheets. He somehow found his 2 colleagues, who had also miraculously survived, and together they spent a harrowing night in an air raid shelter as the city burned around them. The next day, against all odds, they made their way to a barely functioning train station. Yamaguchi, heavily bandaged and in immense pain, boarded an overnight train packed with other burned and bewildered survivors, desperate to get home to Nagasaki. The mushroom cloud followed me. The journey was hell. The train car was a moving vessel of pain and confusion, filled with the wounded and the dying. When Yamaguchi finally arrived in Nagasaki on August 8th, his own family barely recognized him. He was a ghost returning from a city that had ceased to exist, wrapped in bandages, with his face swollen and burned. Still, despite his horrific injuries, he was a company man. On the morning of August 9th, just 3 days after the Hiroshima bombing, Yamaguchi reported for work at the Mitsubishi office in Nagasaki. He had a high fever and could barely stand, but he felt it was his duty to report what he'd seen. He walked into his supervisor's office. His boss looked at him, bandaged and weak, and listened as Yamaguchi tried to explain the impossible. A single bomb, a blinding flash, a city that vanished. His supervisor was skeptical, telling him he must be crazy. How could one bomb destroy an entire city? As Yamaguchi was desperately trying to make him understand, at 11:02 a.m., the world outside the office window once again lit up with that same unholy white light. Yamaguchi was thrown to the ground as the shockwaves from the second atomic bomb, Fat Man, blew the office windows to smithereens. For one terrifying moment, he thought the unbelievable had happened. He later recalled, "I thought the mushroom cloud had followed me from Hiroshima." This time, he was again about 3 kilometers from the hypocenter. The city's hilly terrain and the reinforced concrete of the office building gave him some protection, shielding him from the worst of the blast. He was battered and bruised, his bandages ripped away, but he had escaped another direct hit. He had survived. Again, the Hibakusha. In the days that followed, Yamaguchi's body finally gave in. The double dose of radiation ravaged him. His hair fell out. The burns on his arms festered. He suffered from a constant high fever and vomited relentlessly for over a week. For a time, his family was sure he wouldn't make it. His wife Hisako, who had been caught in the radioactive black rain after the Nagasaki blast, also fell ill. Yet slowly, painstakingly, he recovered. Tsutomu Yamaguchi would go on to live for another 65 years. For decades, he rarely spoke of what happened. In post-war Japan, being a Hibakusha, or explosion-affected person, carried a heavy stigma. Many feared radiation was contagious, or that survivors carried genetic defects. So, like many others, Yamaguchi kept his story to himself, pouring his energy into his work and his family. He worked as a translator for the Allied occupation forces, then as a teacher, before finally returning to his career as an engineer at Mitsubishi. But the bombs never truly left him or his family. He suffered from long-term ailments like cataracts and leukemia. His wife, poisoned by the black rain, died of kidney and liver cancer in 2008. His children all reported suffering from health problems, and his son passed away from cancer in 2005. The loss of his son was a turning point. In his 80s, Yamaguchi decided he couldn't stay silent any longer. He started to believe that his incredible survival wasn't just luck, but a destiny. Having experienced atomic bombings twice and survived, he said, "It is my destiny to talk about it." He began to speak out, sharing his horrifying testimony. He wrote a memoir and a book of poems. He participated in a documentary and even spoke at the United Nations in 2006, pleading for the abolition of nuclear weapons. His message wasn't about politics, but about human dignity. He once told an interviewer, "The reason that I hate the atomic bomb is because of what it does to the dignity of human beings." In March 2009, the Japanese government officially recognized Tsutomu Yamaguchi as a Niju Hibakusha, a twice-bombed person. He remains the only person ever to hold this official status. For him, it wasn't about the money. It was about the record. He said, "My double radiation exposure is now an official government record. It can tell the younger generation the horrifying history of the atomic bombings even after I die." Tsutomu Yamaguchi passed away from stomach cancer on January 4, 2010, at the age of 93. He lived a long life, a life he considered a bonus. He survived the unsurvivable, not once, but twice. He witnessed the very worst of humanity's destructive power and chose to spend his final years fighting for peace. His story is a stark reminder that history isn't just in books. It's written on the bodies and in the memories of people like him. It's a story of almost impossible odds, of incredible fortune and misfortune, but ultimately, it's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a solemn warning that must never be forgotten.